Hey everyone, this is part 2 of the psychology of superheroes. Where we last left off, we talked about Catwoman and how she suffers from low self-esteem, which, looking at her and reading her comic books, you wouldn't think so, but that's, the reason why she, that makes sense when the doctor talked about it anyway. I wouldn't have thought that just by looking at her and reading the comic books that she suffers from low self-esteem, but I guess it makes sense based on her background and based on what he said. So we still have Dr. Octopus, Dr. Otto Octavius to talk about, and Lex Luthor. So Dr. Octopus, he was a brilliant scientist who he's pretty shy and timid in his normal real life, and he used the tentacles he built them in order to handle radioactive material, but unfortunately something went wrong, and there was some kind of explosion, and it bonded the tentacles to him. He has a psychic link to them. So basically they do whatever he says for them to do, because they're part of him. They're bonded to him. And also that experience that the Dr. Bischoff says probably damaged his brain chemistry some, and that's why he has now become more aggressive and quick to anger. Also, part of it is because he views his old self, his timid self, as weakness, and he now doesn't want any part of that, so that's why he's quick to anger. The first thing the doctor says to develop a course of treatment for him is to do a CT scan to make sure his brain is okay, hasn't suffered too much damage. If depending on how much damage is suffered, then would depend on the course of action. If there's too much damage and you can't fix it, you can't reverse it, then he needs to just be locked up for his own safety and the safety of others. That's what the doctor said. There's just no way around it, which I guess makes sense, because some people, their brain chemistry is so altered that you just are like, wow, what are you? I'm not one of those people that watches serial killer documentaries or anything. Mostly just about superheroes, but I can imagine some of those people, their brain chemistry has been altered in such a way that they don't feel things normally. What someone would think is wrong, they might think is just, no big deal. I don't know. Now, that's kind of interesting. I might have to actually watch a couple of those now just to see how that plays into it, if that even does. If there's some killers that just, they're physically and mentally totally fine, but there's just something off about them that causes them to behave that way. I don't know. Actually, I might, look into that, because that sounds interesting. So if the damage can be reversed, or if he can be helped, then they say that they should actually nudge him towards the path of being a scientist again, and that would bring him more acclaim and power and recognition and fame than being a criminal ever would. So if they could, steer him that way, then maybe he could be a productive member of society again, and not the criminal he is. Okay, for Lex Luthor, you guys probably know what his issue is. He is Dr. Bischoff says, has a super ego. So it is all about him, which, if you know anything about Lex Luthor, or if you've read any comics or seen any movies, you know that that's true. And that basically when Superman came to town, him, Like, I mean, he is, brilliant in his own way. He's a billionaire, he's a recognizable guy. But when Superman came to town, that overshadowed him completely. Like, I mean, he's Superman. Like, he has powers and he can fly and all this stuff that Lex Luthor cannot do, and that he spent a lot of time trying to do because he wanted to be number one again. He wanted to be, the most important person. So that is that is his problem. Is he has a super ego, and everything he do is about him, and is about him getting recognition and power and accolades. Like, even his wife and his daughter are basically props to make him look good. That's what the doctor says. I mean, and he even wore a kryptonite ring and gave him cancer from the ring because he wore it so much, just on the offhand chance that he'd get to use it to kill Superman. And the doctor says that even knowing that the ring gave him cancer, he'd probably still do it, but just figure out how to do it better, because he wouldn't admit he was wrong. And, he still wants to destroy Superman. So basically the treatment for him would be therapy. But the thing is that the doctor says that Luthor would consider it a competition and try to outsmart his therapist. Because, he has to be the smartest, the best, the most powerful, whoever person in the room. Like, that is him. That's who he has to be. And all this, it was fine. Like, he was fine, kind of, until Superman shows up. But Superman showing up just inflamed his ego, and he's like, holy cow, I am not the most important person anymore. So, I mean, I guess, I guess I knew that, but at the same time, like, it's interesting to know that. Okay, so another reason I like these magazines is it says Wizard cast the Thor movie. Thor, played by Ralph Mollier, who's from Conan the Barbarian. Jake Olsen is played by Ed Burns. I'm going to be honest, I don't know most of these people. Like, Stella Ward, Dr. Jane Foster. She looks vaguely familiar, but I don't really know her. Let's see. Dean Haggerty as Odin, The Life and Times of Grizzly Adams. That's mentioned in here. I've heard of that, but I've never seen it. And Janine Turner as Hannah Fairmont. And Tommy Davidson as Demetrius Collins. I don't know those people. And you're probably thinking, who are these people? Like, Jake Olsen, Hannah Fairmont, Demetrius Collins. Who are these people? Okay. So, you know how I've said that comic books are like soap operas? Well, I'm about to tell you a soap opera. So at this point, remember 1998, Thor was actually imprisoned in Jake Olsen's body. What happened is Jake Olsen, he's a paramedic. He's a crooked paramedic. He's actually just took the job, and he's actually dating his fiance, because she works at a hospital, in order to steal drugs. And Demetrius Collins is an undercover detective who is looking at Jake for these thefts. But anyway, so he dies in a battle between the Avengers and the Destroyer. And Odin's ravens, who have mystical powers, they push Thor's body, or Thor, his essence, into Jake Olsen's body. Remember, Jake Olsen's dead, in order to save Thor from the Dark Ones, which are like the evil version of the Asgardians. Like I said, it gets better. Then Loki comes up with a plan, and he gets Jake Olsen's soul from hell and recreates Jake, like creates his own kind of version of Jake. And Thor pushes himself back into Jake's body which pushes Jake's soul out. Jake's soul becomes free. You know, it's free now. It goes on to, you know, greener pastures. And Thor and Loki fight, you know, because Loki has his own version of Jake, so to speak. He took over Jake. And then Odin traps Loki in Jake's body, and basically he's mortal now. And Loki comes up with a story, which I honestly am not sure why. It's been so long since I've read the comic books that I don't remember why he does this, but Loki says he's Jake Olsen's twin brother. Again, soap opera. Don't they always use the evil twin plot for everything? Because my sister and I used to watch soap operas when we were much younger, and they did that a lot. The whole evil twin thing. I mean, they did. Anyway, so he does, you know, Loki does the evil twin thing and claim, you know, owns up to all Jake's crimes, saying it was me, I did it. And everyone lives happily ever after. Anyway, it's just, so if you're like, who are all these people? Like Jake Olsen, Fairmont, Demetrius Collins, that's who those people are. And that's the Thor storyline that was running at the time. So you're welcome. I give you a shortened, very condensed version of the huge soap opera that was Thor at the time. Oh, and then here's more characters. I don't know who this guy is. This George Buzza. I probably am pronouncing the name wrong. As Volstagg. Ooh, I know who he is. He's from The Princess Bride. He was Wesley, and he, you know, the drug pirate Roberts. He's Vandal, and then let's see, this guy Scott Glenn. I don't know who that is. As Hogan the Grim. James Woods as Loki. I feel like I've heard of him, and he looks vaguely familiar, but I don't know him. Oh, okay, her. Wait. Okay, Hudson Leak as the Enchantress. Okay, she was part of Xena, the warrior princess. She was like the, you know, one of the villains, main villains. I mean, you probably can't tell from here because this is just a little picture, but I just was like enthralled by her. Like, I had never seen a woman that had super blonde hair and super dark eyes. I just thought she was so just pretty, and I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, holy cow, you know, she just seems so exotic with that combination. That was like I said, my first experience with blonde hair and super dark eyes. So I don't know. I just thought she was really pretty. I thought she was really cool. Like, she made a really good villain, I will say. Oh, and then like this, they talk about the Blade movie getting sequels, because of course it came out in 1998, and it had 2 sequels. And in the last sequel, Blade Trinity, Ryan Reynolds was actually in it, and which that's why I liked it so much, because Ryan Reynolds was in it. I really like Ryan Reynolds. I'm so glad he plays Deadpool now, because he's kind of part of the X-Men universe, which, you know me, I love X-Men. Anyway, so it's funny because when Black Panther came out, everyone was talking about, oh, the first, you know, black superhero, the first African-American superhero. And I'm like, yeah, but what about Blade? What about him? He had 3 movies, and yet no one remembers him, apparently. And although, technically, if you want to be super technical about it, I think Spawn was the first black superhero to get his own movie. That was in 1997, just the year before Blade. I am pretty sure Spawn is on Netflix. I'm not sure if it still is, but it was when I saw it last. You can watch it, but you're not going to be impressed by the special effects. It was 1997, of course. The special effects are pretty terrible. No disrespect to people at the time, honestly. They just were not good. Don't watch it if you don't like clowns. I mean, seriously, don't watch it if you don't like clowns. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, and then of course Storm in the X-Men movies, people think she doesn't count either. So I just found it, although like I will have to say Black Panther was amazing. I mean, Chadwick Boseman did such a great job. Like I can't even imagine anyone else as Black Panther, honestly. He did an amazing job. I mean, and I think, and maybe people are saying that's the first really good, movie with the black superhero at the lead. I don't know, because I mean I liked Blade. I thought they were good, but just not a super popular character, I guess. Of course, I will say with comic book movies back then, of course, not as many people watched them or knew about them because comic books were their own little niche. Like, there are people that liked comic books, but that wasn't like a totally mainstream thing. Like I remember getting made fun of in school because I loved comic books and superheroes, and now it's mainstream. It's totally fine. Everyone knows superheroes. Everyone has seen probably at least one superhero movie, if not more than that. But at the time, they weren't common, and nobody got it. Not as many people. Anyway, back to this. Off of me. So, and then there were rumors that Sarah Michelle Gellar, who played Buffy the Vampire Slayer, was going to be Rogue in the X-Men movies. That would have been interesting. I don't know. I mean, Anna Paquin did the best she could with the material she was given, because, I mean, you guys know that Rogue is my favorite. I mentioned it probably in almost every video. I'm sorry. But she just, the movies, I didn't like how they portrayed her at all. She was just weak, powerless. I was just very disappointed because to me, the cool thing about Rogue is she's one of the most powerful X-Men, but she's so invulnerable, and yet she's so vulnerable emotionally because she can't touch anyone. So I just thought that was so cool, the juxtaposition of being so vulnerable but invulnerable at the same time, which I think I just missed that from the movies. I was very disappointed in that, but I guess because they thought the whole Ms. Marvel angle would make it too complicated. Although they could have just been like, she had an encounter with a superhero and accidentally absorbed their powers, which is kind of what happened. But anyway, so they just went in a different direction, which that's fine. It just I was not that happy with it, but I was happy to see that X-Men was, getting their own movie finally. So I hope if anyone's out there has any connection with like future X-Men movies, please make Rogue, better. Please make her cool. Please make her the strong powerhouse, female powerhouse that she is, but keep the emotional vulnerability. Like that's what makes her such a complex, awesome character. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox now. So they always have this in here, the top 10 heroes and villains, which, look, we talked about Spawn. And I guess, like I talked about him briefly, but for those of you who don't know, part of the Image Comics, his name's Albert Simmons. He was a former Marine, member of a Black Ops group, and he basically did all these missions that, nobody else wanted to do, and you probably shouldn't do, like a lot of things that, are very suspect. I guess that's what Black Ops means. So he developed a conscience, basically, Albert Simmons, and his boss didn't want to deal with it. So he told Albert's best friend, who was also in the group, to kill him, which he did. And his soul, because of all the things that he had done in this life as part of the Black Ops group, went to hell. And he made a deal basically with the devil to become a hellspawn, basically a supernatural being that works for the devil, that does, his bidding in order to see his wife again. And he came back to Earth. He was like totally, because he was burned alive. He had totally, basically think of Deadpool, like when he's totally scarred and messed up. That's kind of how he looked. Except he had like physical pain all the time. Spawn did. And basically the deal was, as soon as you use up all your powers, you have to come straight back to hell. So he but he didn't want to work for the devil, so he found a way to use his powers, to help people, but he tried to use them sparingly and limit, his use, because he didn't want to go back to hell. And the series was basically him trying to figure out what had happened to him, because he comes back, doesn't really know who he is. He just remembers like a first name or last name and his wife. He realizes it's been 5 years, and now his wife is married to his best friend who killed him. And they have a daughter together and stuff. Anyway, so just like super quick background on him. And Wolverine, he's usually always popular. I mean, yeah, wearing the shirt. Granted, to be fair, they don't have shirts that say I love Rogue or anything, or I love Storm. Now they have more merchandise, but of course back then everything was about Wolverine because he was the most popular, most well-known, most recognized, X-Men / superhero. Well, one of the most for Marvel, I will say. Witchblade, she's not a character that you really hear about anymore. She's a really cool character. I believe we talked about her before. Batman, he's always popular. Thor, Captain America, Nightwing, that's surprising because Nightwing, not a really super popular character. Daredevil, kind of a surprise. And sometimes they do these character profiles. Like this one's Gambit. And it talks about, his mutant powers kinetic energy. He uses it to charge things and blow them up. And he uses playing cards because that's just, it's easy to use them and also easy to keep them on hand and get, more ready supply. And apparently they say his bow staff is made out of some wacky resilient substance that lets it get charged with explosive energy so it can be reused again and again. That's what they say. I mean, they don't even explain what it's made out of because they don't know. The writers have never really explained that. So, basically he grew up an orphan. He was taken in by the Thieves Guild. He married Belladonna, who was part of the Assassin's Guild, joined the two when he was super young. Of course, he's always pursued Rogue, and they took him into the X-Men before they kind of knew about his past. And Rogue didn't even know he was married until the, I think, 8th issue of X-Men. And he joined Uncanny X-Men 264, 65, somewhere. That was his first appearance. Anyway, so then it was found out that later he was responsible for leading the Marauders into the Morlock tunnels, and where they slaughtered all the Morlocks. The Morlocks are mutants that believe that they're too disfigured or too they can't pass as human to live, up with the humans, so they live down in the tunnels and the sewers below New York. And so apparently he was responsible, Gambit, for leading Mr. Sinister's Marauders into the tunnels and slaughtering everyone, which once the X-Men found that out, he was out of the X-Men for a while. He's very charming. He's been after Rogue for a long time. And I mean, now they're married, so that's really cool. I keep saying I'll have to do all these videos on Rogue because she's my favorite, and I just keep coming up with other stuff I want to do first. Not because I don't love Rogue and don't want to do the videos about her, but just because I'm ooh, this is a really cool thing. This kind of relates to what's going on right now, or anyway, so one of these days for sure. Oh, and because they were talking about the Thor movie, here's the Thor book I was telling you about, the soap opera that I gave you a very super condensed version. They actually gave it an A though. They gave X-Men a C+. Ouch. Granted, not all the X-Men stories are great. So I can't fault them for that. Because some of them are, not that great, not that good. So anyway, that's this one, The Psychology of Superheroes, issue 88. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you'll actually subscribe and join me for future videos. I think next we're going to talk about the Batman storyline that I mentioned, No Man's Land, where Gotham has actually been cut off from the rest of the world by an earthquake, and the federal government has decided that they're not going to send any help, and so it basically exists by itself on its own. So if you're interested in that, I hope you will join me for the next one. Until then, bye.